Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Thankfully, my throat is a little bit clearer today so far. Woo! Yesterday was tough. Anyway, we are continuing our study of the Olivet Discourse. The question is the Olivet Discourse supposed to be divided into two separate discussions? One, a prediction of the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, at which time, according to the amillennialist and according to the postmillennialist, Jesus came. He came on the clouds, he came with the angels, came with a shout. He came in great glory. But then we're told the apostles also ask about a different, ultimate, final coming of the Lord on the clouds, power and great glory, with the angels, with a shout, to gather the elect. We are told that AD 70 was a type and a shadow of the final coming of the Lord. That's why I wrote this book some years ago, and why it's included in my January special. Don't forget, January 2021, U.S. orders only, all right? AD 70, a shadow of the real end, unquote. Elijah has come, a solution in Romans 11, 25 to 27. And can you believe Jesus said this? If you ordered them separately, all right, they would cost you a good bit. But for January 2021, U.S. orders only, total delivered price $30. Saves you almost $20. Almost $20. So take advantage of that. All right. We are continuing our study of the wedding motif in Matthew 25, 1 to 13. The coming of the Lord, the bridegroom for the wedding, the five wise, the five foolish virgins. Let me say this again. I know you know this by this time, but if Matthew 25, 1 to 13 is talking about the coming of the Lord in AD 70, then futurism is false. There is no other coming of the Lord for the wedding. You know, for those who say that AD 70 was a type and a shadow of the real end that I address in this book, you really got to ask yourself the question, okay, if AD 70 was the time of the wedding, as posited, by the way, by Kenneth Gentry, then if that's a type and a shadow of the real end, then who does Jesus marry when he comes at the end of the Christian age? You can't say this was a type of that. This was a wedding. What was it foreshadowing? Well, it would have to be a wedding. That's two weddings. Two brides. You see, this idea that AD 70 was a type and a shadow of something else in our future just simply doesn't work. But I digress. Okay. Yesterday I shared with you how Isaiah 65 is an incredible passage to understand the New Testament doctrine of the wedding. More specifically, the wedding feast, the marriage feast, as we will develop as we go along. But yesterday, I shared a bit of hermeneutic with you. That is, when in the first century, in Hebraic hermeneutic, it was understood when a writer or speaker quoted from, cited, echoed any part of an Old Testament prophecy, they were bringing that entire context into the mind of the readers or the listeners. So, in Isaiah 65, 1 and 2, it says this, Yahweh says of Israel and of the Gentiles, I was sought by those who did not ask for me. I was found of those who did not seek me. I said, here I am, to a nation that was not called by my name. Verse 2, I have stretched out my hands all day long to a rebellious people who walk in a way that is not good according to their own thoughts, a people who provoke me to anger continually to my face. So here, Yahweh says, I have tried and I've tried and I've tried to get Israel to return to me. My invitation has fallen on dull ears. They refuse to listen. That goes all the way back to Isaiah chapter 6. This people's ears are dull of hearing. Their eyes, they cannot see. Lest at any time they see, and lest at any time they hear and be converted, and I should heal them. So as a result of their refusal to see, as a result of their refusal to hear the call of the Lord, what did the Lord say? Well, he said, I was sought by those who did not ask for me. Well, Israel wasn't asking for him. I was found by those who did not seek me. Pardon me. It wasn't Israel that was seeking him. Just the contrary. Verse 2 is talking about Israel not seeking him. So we have Israel refusing to answer, not seeking him. And who is Israel? Well, it's the nation that was once called by his name. But there's a stark contrast between Israel refusing the call, refusing to seek him, refusing to acknowledge him, refusing to answer, versus those who had never sought him before, those who had never known him before, those who had never been called by his name. Israel at one time was called by the name of the Lord, so this doesn't fit Israel. This is Israel the rebellious, Israel the unbelievers, versus those who had never been believers, who had never been called by the name of the Lord, who had never sought him before, but are now. Even though Israel refuses to listen, even though Israel refuses the call, this people, these nations are heeding the call. Well, we go over to Romans chapter 10. And by the way, let's make no mistake, that prophecy was not fulfilled in the days of the return from the Babylonian captivity. Hello? I'm sorry, it doesn't work. But we go over to Romans chapter 10. Got to hurry here. In Romans chapter 10, Paul begins the chapter, as we have it divided, by saying, Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they might be saved. For I bear them record that they have a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge. And he says, they, being ignorant of the righteousness of God, and going about to establish their own righteousness, have not submitted themselves to the righteousness which is of God. They did not realize Christ was the goal of the law. It's also the end of the law for those who believe. But in 14 and following, Paul describes the preaching of the gospel to Israel. Israel first. I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. It's the power of God unto salvation for all men. To the Jew first, then to the Greek. And Paul in Romans chapter 10 and 14 says, how shall they call on him? Now he's talking about Israel. On him in whom they've not believed. How shall they believe in him whom they have not heard? How shall they hear without a preacher? How shall they preach unless they are sent, as it is written? Oh, this is good. How beautiful are the feet of those who preach the gospel of peace, who bring glad tidings of good things. Well, you see, this is a direct quote of Isaiah 52, 8 and following. Pardon me. The preaching of good news. Well, what's the good news? The good news is Isaiah 52, 1 and 2. Arise, arise. Put on your beautiful garments, O Jerusalem. Shake yourself from the dust of the earth and arise. Number one, that's resurrection. Number two, put on your beautiful garments. That's the wedding. You see, the proclamation of the good news is that the time of the wedding has now come, according to Paul. Remember, Paul's quoting from Isaiah 52, bringing that entire context to mind. Verse 16, but have they all obeyed? Has Israel obeyed? Even though the gospel was preached to them to proclaim that the time of the wedding had arrived? No, they haven't. Because Isaiah says, Lord, who has believed our report? So then, faith comes by hearing, hearing by the word of God. But I say, have they not heard? Has Israel not heard? And Paul says, yes. Their sound has gone out to all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. Quoting from Psalms. He's setting the stage for saying that Israel is without excuse. Because just as nature attests to the glory of God, the gospel had been proclaimed to proclaim the gospel of Christ. But I say, did Israel not know? Now he's already asked, have they obeyed? And the answer is no. Well, okay, if they did not answer, if they did not obey, did they not know? And his response to that is, no, they knew. And their response is exactly what was foretold by Moses. You see, Paul is calling forth. He is calling forth both Isaiah and the Psalms and Moses. He's calling them forth as witnesses against Israel for Israel's rejection of the gospel in his day, his time, to bring forth the realization that Israel, in her unbelief, Israel, in her rebellion, was without excuse because their sound has gone forth into all the world, and Moses predicted it. About a time. Okay. Do yourself a favor. Go back and start reading Romans 10:14. Go all the way through the end of the chapter. And we'll pick that up tomorrow. Don't forget, take advantage of the January 2021 special. 3 books. Elijah Has Already Come. AD 70, A Shout of the Real End, ? And Can You Believe Jesus Said This? Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. Tab right up, a banner right up at the very top. Just click on it, and you're going to save yourself almost $20. Okay, I'm out of time for today. Thank you again for joining me. I will see you on the flip side.